Okay, we're going to start with the biomes here, and we're going to start out with the tundra. And this is going to encircle the Earth just south of our ice-covered poles, the polar seas in the northern hemisphere. And it's about 20% of our Earth's land surface. It has a thin layer of um, soil that thaws, but up underneath that there is a permafrost layer that never thaws, so it's solid ice, solid frozen. And that thin layer that thaws in the summer months, that's where you're going to have a little bit of plants being able to grow if they don't have deep roots. Um, because the growing season is just those couple of short summer months, it's very hard to penetrate that permafrost because it's so thick, and so the roots can only anchor in that top little area of soil that's real boggy where that thaws. So it's only no trees ever grow there. You're going to have short grasses and lichens and mosses and some really, really dwarf or short shrubs. You can see here we find the tundra. We're talking about now around the Arctic seas up here. Um, those polar seas. You can see down here in this figure, you can see the vegetation. You don't see any trees, just things that don't have to grow very tall because they can't have big, deep roots. I have a lot of birds that migrate in and out, and of course the kind of animals you're going to see caribou. Animals that can tolerate that frigid cold weather that they have. And moving on, the coniferous forest is the next one, and we also call it the taiga. It's right below the tundra, and you have coniferous forest here with trees that have cones, like your spruce trees, your pine trees, your fir trees, your Christmas trees. And it covers about 11% of our land. We also refer to these as the boreal forest. The trees that live here are well adapted to cold weather. They have leaves that are needle-like leaves because a lot of snow falls and it weighs a lot, so the big, wide, broad leaves wouldn't be able to support that. And then the bark has a very thick covering on it. There's also a temperate rainforest that is an old growth forest. Some of them have trees that are as old as 800 years old, and we're talking about evergreen forests like the redwood forest out in California that are part of the taiga. Now you can see it's in the dark blue there, so it's right up under the tundra if we're moving south. And you can see the kind of trees, lots of cone-bearing trees. And then, of course, a bull moose is an example of an animal because it's still very, very cold there. It's not as cold as the tundra, though. Then we move on to the temperate deciduous forest, which is where we live. And we have a moderate climate. We have a decent amount of rainfall. It's considered relatively high. And our seasons are pretty much well defined for 4 different seasons. So our growing season can be anywhere from 140 to about 300 days long in different areas of the temperate deciduous forest. This is the area that's characterized by trees that lose their leaves in the fall of each year. And the tallest trees will form a canopy, and there's lots of ground life up underneath those trees. So you can see by the map in the red that we are right in the middle of the temperate deciduous forest, and you can see where they are across Europe and Asia. The trees forming this tall canopy, and all their leaves fall off in the fall, and we're going to have lots of life because the temperatures are not extreme in one way or the other. You know, you've got plenty of arthropods. Millipede is shown here, insects. You've got chipmunks, squirrels, you've got bobcats, deer, animals that can survive these different temperature variations. And then, of course, you got a lot of plant life that you find here because the growing season is pretty long. Now our tropical rainforests are the most diverse biome, and we find these around the equator. And the reason you have so many different types of plants and animals there is because the weather stays warm all year and you have plenty of rainfall. This is the richest of all the land biomes. You've got 3 stories basically. You've got a forest floor, and then an understory of plant life, and then a canopy that is the highest trees that form the canopy there. Most of the animals do live in the trees, lots of insects. You have epiphytes that grow in a lot of areas, and an epiphyte grows on another plant. They have their own roots to absorb moisture and minerals that are leached from the canopy, but they'll grow on another plant like an orchid or a fern or a bromeliad, a pineapple. These are all epiphytes. The problem here is that the soil is terrible. They don't have good soil at all. That's because it's wet and humid, hot, and so you have a lot of recycling that occurs pretty fast of nutrients. And this shows the different levels. You can see the canopy with the tall trees up here, and then the understory is all in here where you've got shorter trees and bushes and vines and things like that, and then of course the forest floor. And you're going to have different things that live in these 3 different areas or levels of a rainforest. These are some of your representative animals. You can see now that we're right at the equator. The red line is the equator on the map, and all the green areas there, that's the tropical rainforest. And you're familiar with a lot of these animals and plants. It's the most diverse biome that there is. The shrublands occur along coasts that have really dry summers and wet winters. And there's a lot of shrubs there because they can withstand that dry weather. And in California, there's a real dense shrubland. It's called the chaparral. It doesn't have an understory or anything on the ground. The problem is it's highly flammable. And in the news lately, we've been hearing about the California fires. That's why, because it's extremely dry there in the summer. And all those shrubs and things catch fire, and unfortunately people have built houses around those, and so the houses burn as well. And we usually hear about this every summer. And you can see there the shrub life is very abundant. And some of the animals you might find, of course, is a scrub jay. And then you've got lots of plants that can grow in that shrub area. So you don't have a lot of tall trees. It's going to be more shrub stuff. The grasslands we also call prairies or plains, and they have an annual rainfall that is more than 25 centimeters, and that's not enough to support trees, so you have a lot of grasses that grow there. These are called the bread baskets of the world because of wheat and rye and oats and corn are grown in these areas. Those grasses are well adapted to the environment as it changes. They tolerate grazing, they tolerate flooding, they tolerate drought, and very often there are fires that spread through the grasslands. The temperatures, you've got very cold winters. They can be bitterly cold, and the summers can be very hot and dry. Another name for grasslands is savannas. Their dry season is cooler, but their rainy season is very, very hot. And you can see these in the purple up on the map. And we've got, you've got some trees there, but you can see you've got a lot of grasses, and this is where the buffalo roam, is in the grasslands. Now the savanna is another name for it. They're a little different. You see in the purple here, and this is what we see over in Africa with the zebras and the giraffes and cheetahs and animals like that. But again, it's mainly grasses growing. They have a lot of grazing animals there. The desert, of course, is going to be where you don't have a lot of moisture. Deserts cover about 30% of our earth, They get less than 25 centimeters of rain a year, and there's a huge temperature difference between the day and the night. The night can be freezing, freezing cold, and the day is scorching, it's so hot. Um, Vegetation, of course, the most common is the cactus because they can conserve water and tolerate those drought conditions. You can see at the map, it's the tan color there, and you see where the deserts are located. You're going to have a lot of animals that live there that will burrow in the daytime, and at night they'll come out of their little holes underground and scavenge and find food to eat. You do have a lot of birds of prey that come in and things, and you have wolves. That's a wolf that's shown right there. A lot of reptiles, a lot of snakes and things like that. This is a good place to stop it. We'll pick up on the next video with the aquatic biomes.